This person didn't miss you. They provoked. They wanted to get under your skin. They wanted to see you lose control. They hoped you would beg, just to confirm they still had some importance. It wasn't nostalgia. It was ego. It was a need for control. This person didn't come back for love. They returned to see if there was still an exposed wound, to test if you were still hurting inside, to measure how much you would still bend. But you didn't respond. You didn't chase after them. You didn't bow down. And it was in that silence that everything changed, because this person realized. They realized they lost. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't retaliate. You didn't fall into the game they expected to control you. This person tried to manipulate, but they sank in their own lack of affection. They ended up alone, carrying the weight of their own emptiness. You stayed calm, and your silence spoke louder than any attack. It clearly stated, now, it's this person who feels, it's this person who lost, it's this person who provoked, pleading for pain. Have you ever gone through this? Have you noticed that those who try to destabilize you are the ones begging not to be forgotten? If this resonated with you, comment here. I needed to hear this. This person didn't miss you, not in the way you imagined, not like someone who lost something valuable and now recognizes it. This person provoked. It was premeditated, it was intentional, it was cold. Every word, every gesture, every unexpected appearance, every rehearsed silence, it was designed for you to react. It was meant to draw something out of you. And it wasn't love. It was instinct. It was need, disguised as pride. This person didn't come back because they realized they loved you. They returned because they couldn't stand the idea of being forgotten, of no longer being the center of your collapse, of causing nothing anymore. You know this. Maybe you pretended otherwise, but you felt it. In their expression, in their lack of depth, in the disjointed phrases. This person wanted to see if they could still shake you up, if your breath still wavered upon hearing her name, if your voice still trembled when the subject came up again. It was a test, and you were the target. She didn't miss you. She felt a loss of influence. She missed the control she had over your emotions. This person didn't reach out to you out of lack of options, but out of lack of power, because when you started to reclaim your own life, when you began to center yourself again, this person panicked. Not about you, but about her own insignificance, and she couldn't handle it, because she was used to being your center, your downfall, your weakness, and suddenly, that was no longer the case. You went silent. You pulled away. You didn't respond to the gesture. And that was the blow. This person was not expecting maturity. She expected chaos. She expected pleading. She expected you to fall apart again, but you didn't. Not out of malice, not out of revenge, but because you finally realized. You realized who was in front of you. You recognized the intention. You saw the pattern. You understood the game. And that was enough. You didn't play, you didn't fall, you didn't need to defend yourself. Your absence became the strongest response you ever gave. Because this time, you didn't react. And this person felt it. She felt the taste of her own plan failing. She felt her own trap turning against her. She felt the silence she had built, now echoing inside her chest. You went silent, and the silence burned more than any word. This person provoked and hurt herself. Because she discovered she no longer had a place where she once dominated. There is no more space. There is no more thirst. There is no more hunger, only memory. And memory doesn't respond, doesn't plead, doesn't feed the ego. This person tried to hit you, but was struck by her own attempt. Because she provoked expecting a scream and found presence. She expected a crisis and found indifference. She expected confusion and found clarity. You changed. This person didn't realize. Maybe she realized now, but it's too late. Because when someone tries to manipulate how you feel, they end up revealing what they can't feel. That person is not at peace. You are. And that's what hurts. Not your absence, but what it signifies. It means you no longer depend on approval, that you no longer need to respond to provocation to feel real. That person lost you the moment they tried to test you. You didn't fall, you didn't give in, you didn't justify yourself, and that was the worst response they could have received. Have you ever experienced this? Have you noticed that the one who provokes you the most is often the one most afraid of being ignored? Comment, I needed to hear this if you've felt this in your bones. But their pain isn't just your absence. It's realizing that time has passed and the power is gone, that the game has grown tiring, that the person who used to tremble now breathes in peace. That person wanted to know if they were still at the center, but the center is now somewhere else, and there's no more room for manipulation disguised as longing. They tried to shove you back to your old place, but you no longer fit there. And absence turned into presence, presence of self, presence of discernment, presence of maturity. That person provoked you, but there was no response, only an echo. And the echo spoke more than any confrontation, because when you don't react, that's when the other person sees themselves, and sometimes what they see is unbearable. That person had to face their own emptiness, and that emptiness bears your absent name, your steady gaze, your uncomfortable calm. They nudged you for drama. But what came back was indifference. Have you felt this? Have you seen someone trying to throw you off balance and losing their own footing? And you know what's even more bothersome? That person realized you held no grudge. You wished them no ill. You didn't stew over it, you simply moved on. And moving on is more painful for those left waiting for reactions. Because the absence of response is the end of power. You liberated yourself, not out of revenge, but because it no longer made sense. And this is the truth that this person had to swallow. Alone. Have you ever experienced something similar? Tell me in the comments. Finish this sentence. Being emotionally tested by someone is, and if this text stirred up a memory that you still avoid, it's because you realized. You realized everything that was done. You realized who this person really was. You realized that the provocation was not love. It was neediness. It was desperation. It was control. And now you are no longer there, because this person still hasn't understood that there is no going back. They might insist. They might reappear with softer speeches. They might disguise their control as affection. But you are no longer accessible in the same way. You've changed your path, changed your pace, changed your silence. And what once shattered you now protects you. This person misses the feelings they made you have. They don't miss who you are. They miss the impact they caused, the immediate response, the drama that validated their existence within your story. And now, in the face of your silence, they lose their frame of reference, because they don't know how to deal with someone who no longer places them at the center of their own pain. You stopped justifying, stopped explaining, stopped providing context for someone who just wanted an argument. And this takes away everything that sustained the game. You are not denying. You are not taking revenge. You simply understood. You realized. And this realization has set you free. Free from the cycle. Free from the need to be understood by someone who always confused you. Free from the urgency to prove what you feel to someone who only wanted to use that as ammunition. This person still insists, with small gestures, long silences, cold reappearances, as if you were still the same. But they are talking to the old version of you. The one that is no longer there. They throw out hints, test your reaction. Watch from afar, waiting for some emotional relapse. But your response remains the same. Absence. And absence, for those who live for control, is a sentence. This person feels, but does not admit it, because admitting it would mean acknowledging that you have become greater than they can reach. And everything they do now is trying to provoke you again, trying to recreate the past, trying to resurrect the pain. But when there is no longer any exposed vulnerability, the provocations lose their meaning. Because now you are no longer available for that kind of touch. Now only what has depth reaches you. You no longer accept breadcrumbs disguised as reconciliation. You no longer respond to the call that only wants to drag you down, because you realized that what this person wanted was not love. It was control. It was response. It was to feel important again. And what they found was something different. A version of you that does not tremble, that does not react, that just looks and no longer feels what they used to. Have you ever experienced this shift? That moment when you realize that the person who once threw you off balance no longer touches you today? If so, comment, "I turned the key," and stay with me, because there's more. This person might try to flip the narrative, pretend it was you who distanced yourself out of ego, say that you have changed, that you're cold, that you lost the feeling. But that's just another attempt. An attempt to make you doubt your evolution. An attempt to bring you back to a place where they still know how to deal with you. But you won't go back. Because now you see yourself. Now you hear yourself. Now you realize, when someone comes out of love, and when they come out of a need for power, this person doesn't understand your peace. They don't understand how you cannot respond, not plead, not try to solve things, but it's because they haven't seen everything you had to feel to get here. You bled, you cried, you tried 1,000 times, but at some point, what tires you isn't the pain, it's the repetition. It's realizing that every time you let your guard down, this person used that to hit you. Not anymore. Now you are whole. It's not a piece waiting for approval. It's not a reflection of someone else's pain. It's presence. And presence makes uncomfortable those who expected a reaction. That person didn't lose you now. They lost you when they decided to play with what was sincere. They lost you when they tested you instead of embracing you. They lost you when they wanted you to be fragile just so they could feel strong. And this is something they can't even forgive in themselves. Did you feel it? Did you notice the exact moment when the connection broke? That subtle instant, when you looked and recognized nothing anymore? Tell me here, what was the final point of your story? This person didn't seek reconciliation. They sought to repair their ego. They didn't come back to hear how you felt. They returned to avoid dealing with their own emptiness. And that is cruel, because for a moment, maybe you believed, maybe you opened the door, even without saying anything, even in silence. You waited for something, a new gesture, a truth, a bit of courage. But what came was more of the same. The cold subtext, the strategic smiles, the measured phrases, the gaze that only sought control. This person didn't come back to rebuild. They came back to measure, to make sure they still had some kind of emotional hold over you, and that made you feel nauseous. You realized that the pain wasn't what they did anymore, but who they continued to be. It was in that moment that the key truly turned, because you didn't feel angry, nor hurt. You felt tired, tired of defending yourself against someone you loved, tired of explaining yourself to someone who never wanted to understand, tired of maintaining a bridge that was only crossed from one side. This person thought they could come back whenever they wanted. They thought you'd be there, waiting, available, with your heart open and your scar exposed. But no, time passed, and you didn't stay still. You grew, silently, painfully, but you grew. Now, you don't kneel to be accepted. You don't mold yourself to be understood. You don't reshape yourself to fit into others' shallow realities. This person still hasn't grasped the depth you've reached. They still think they can use the same words, the same insinuations, the same strategies. But now everything seems small. Everything feels weak compared to what you've become inside. There's no more space. There's no turning back. And the worst punishment for someone who thrived on your reactions is realizing that you no longer react. You exist, and that is enough. They tried to provoke you, but you didn't explode. You didn't plead. You didn't defend yourself. You simply stood your ground whole. And that's what destroys them inside, the realization that there's nowhere left to touch. There are no more gaps. There are no more emotions served up on a platter. Have you ever gone through this? Did you feel that someone returned just to gauge how much you still suffer, only to discover that you no longer suffer? If so, comment, "I healed in silence," because that's what this person didn't foresee. That your silence would cease to be a sign of weakness and become a sign of strength. You recognized the game and chose not to play. This person expected confrontation, but what they found was sovereignty. And now, they don't know what to do with that. They watch from a distance, trying to understand who you've become, and maybe they never will. Because who you are now no longer fits within the limited understanding of someone who only knows how to love when they're in control. This person had every chance, but chose to provoke, to test, to manipulate. And when someone chooses the game over the truth, the one who was willing to stay loses. You stayed as long as you could. You tried as long as it made sense. But now you don't need to fight for something that only drained you. You didn't give up, you realized. And that realization was your new beginning. That's the point they don't understand. That you didn't turn your back. You turned the page. And a turned page isn't reread, it's learned from. Do you feel that too? What was the moment you realized there was no turning back? Tell me in the comments. This person had every chance, every single one. They had their best, they gave everything. They offered their heart, completely defenseless. And still, they chose to test. They chose to provoke, poke, manipulate. They thought their love was infinite. They thought your patience had no end. They thought you would beg, like before. But no, you didn't beg. You didn't respond. You didn't lower yourself. You realized that those who provoke are deep down begging for presence. That those who reappear out of nowhere often just want to see if they still have some power. It's not love, it's ego, and this time you didn't give in. Not out of pride, but out of awareness, out of sanity, out of love for yourself. This person tried to trap you in the past, but what they didn't realize is that the past they used against you no longer has power. You've matured. You've rebuilt yourself in silence, without making noise, without notifying anyone, and now you are no longer available. Those who play with pure feelings end up surrounded by the shadows they created themselves. They provoked and lost themselves in the process. You set yourself free. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to see this too. It might be someone still caught in this kind of cycle, waiting for emotional scraps and thinking it's love. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been provoked by someone who just wanted to know if it still hurt, and realized that the one who got hurt was the one trying to test you? Let's talk down here. Your comment could help someone else get out of the same place. Leave a like if this made sense to you, because that way I know this message needs to continue reaching more people. And of course, if you feel this content relates to what you're experiencing, subscribe to the channel now. There's a lot more coming your way. We're not ending this conversation here. I'll see you in the next video.